moderate the third session of the European Energy, the first edition of the European Energy Efficiency Day, that is empowering city district through digitalization and system integration. I'm here accompanied by a panel of very distinguished speakers. So I've got four colleagues joining me for this 75 minutes of discussion. I will go very briefly through the presentation of the speakers. So we have Vincent Berruto, who is the head of unit responsible for innovation, research, digitalization, competitiveness at DG Energy in the European Commission. Vincent, before this role, also headed the unit in charge of energy efficiency at the Executive Agency for Small and Medium-Sized Enterprise. So, Vincent, you are very well placed, I think, to give us a very complete, comprehensive contribution to this discussion. Thank you very much for being with us. Then we have Oliver Kraft. Oliver is Executive Vice President for Sustainable Communities at Siemens Smart Infrastructure. Everyone knows Siemens. Kraft, Oliver held various global management positions for Siemens in his careers. Now, currently, his role really revolves around the areas of digitalization, sustainability for enterprises, cities, districts, campuses, and sustainable communities. Oliver, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Then we have Ralph Goldman. Ralph is Head of Division for Energy Efficiency and is Energy Advisor at the European Investment Bank. And before Ralph had several important experience in the framework in relation to energy agencies, structuring energy performance contracting, and in the public sector. So again, Ralph, we look forward to your contribution to this session. And thank you very much for joining us. And,
good morning.
Thank you, Ralph. And last but not least, Ines Schuster. Ines is responsible for technical coordination and research at Aspen Smart City Research. And in her role, Ines is managing content and progress of the R&D program, as well as everything that is necessary and related infrastructure in terms of building, grid, and the ICT. So, Ines, thank you very much for being with us today. The session, maybe just to set with the framework for our participants. During this session, we will cover energy system integration of supply and demand. We will look into energy system efficiency, linking renewable supplies and flexible end-use sectors, so buildings, transport, and industry. And in these 75 minutes, I would really like to try to, with the speakers and participation from the public, I would like to try to reflect and to look a little bit more in depth into all these elements. It will be challenging. Let's see what we can achieve in this discussion. Before starting, just a couple of housekeeping rules. So, first of all, the session is recorded and will be available on the European Alliance to Save Energy website after the event. We are also live on Twitter, so please feel free to share this information to your network. And very important, if you have a question for our panelists, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. So preferably not the chat, but the Q&A function. So all our speakers can see the questions and can also help me to understand and filter who is responding to what. Well, without any further ado, I would like to start this session. So maybe Vincent, we can start with you. Can you please briefly present the Commission's new action plan on digitalization on the energy system, and how will this contribute to increasing system efficiency? Vincent, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Luigi, and good morning to everyone. Perhaps before presenting the action plan, I should answer the question, why do we prepare an action plan on the digitization of the energy system? You know that under the Green Deal and the REPowerEU plan, we aim at making our energy system more and more efficient, electrified, decentralized, and we want to have it fed with an increasing share of intermittent renewable energy sources. And so we need more and more intelligence in the energy system, and to make sure that we reduce our energy use, to make sure that we match it with supply at all times, and that we use all forms of storage and flexibility that exist on the market. We need these digital solutions, and that's precisely the purpose of our action plan, to promote the uptake of these solutions in a way that is fair and cost-effective. So we've gone through a very broad co-creation process. We consulted a lot of stakeholders, we had many workshops, and we came up with 5 main intervention areas for the digitalization of the energy system. First, the development of a European data sharing infrastructure to facilitate the access and exchange of energy data between products, but also between market actors. And we are talking here about the TSOs, DSOs, the aggregators, but also new players that may come in the market and propose new digital services, including in cities. The second area we've been developing is about enhancing the uptake of digital technologies in the energy sector, both on the supply side, but also on the demand side, in a way that generates growth and jobs in Europe. And so we will be looking at the whole innovation chain and address not only research and innovation efforts, but also the market uptake of best available digital solutions in every sector. The third area that we've been focusing on concerns the empowerment of consumers, and looking at how digitalization can support their engagement in energy markets, and what we must do to preserve their rights and increase their digital skills. Fourth, we look at the other side of the coin. What must be done to ensure cybersecurity and data protection? And finally, the last part of the plan is to cover measures to reduce the carbon footprint of ICT solutions, meaning measures that they increase energy efficiency, reuse waste heat. I mean, it could be, for instance, in cities where the heat produced by data center is being reused in buildings, and also promote, of course, the use of renewable energy sources in the ICT sector. So in a nutshell, this is what our action plan is about. And so that's, of course, very relevant for the session of this morning. Thanks, Luigi.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vincent. Very, very interesting. And indeed, to go in depth and discuss and analyze all these pillars, we probably would need a dedicated session, because it seems very, very broad action plan. But I will come back to you later with some question. And now I'd like to go to Oliver. Oliver, maybe first of all, if you want to give a first reaction comment to what Vincent has introduced, but also what is interesting for us from an industrial perspective, we would like to ask you, what is Siemens' role in promoting digital technologies and system efficiency? Give us the perspective from the side of the solutions provider. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'm very happy that you're having me today. I think, first of all, I think that this is, let's say, one of the most important topics in our time to tackle. Climate change, and of course, energy efficiency plays a major role. And as a technology provider, of course, we can help with our technologies in order to achieve energy efficiency. But let me take a step back. The first thing that normally comes to mind when you think about digitalization, and that's then technology, is technology. But there's another element, and that element is collaboration. And collaboration allows us, and we just heard the word co-creation, that allows us actually to find out what kind of technology solutions we actually need. Now, coming back to your actual question, what kind of role does Siemens play? How do we promote, for example, digital technologies And yeah, how do we do that? Well, there are different ways of doing it. Okay, one is, for example, that you use campaigns in order to raise the awareness, in order to create transparency and commitment. But on the other hand, we just finished a prime example for collaboration and dialogue, and that is Expo 2020. And Expo 2020, over a period of 6 months, we hosted about 2,000 customers, 475 companies. And during that time, we addressed the topic of energy efficiency. And let's not forget, that was the biggest platform for dialogue and collaboration for the world's greatest, basically, innovators, for pragmatists, for visionaries, and others. And what we did is we created a blueprint for future smart cities, a technology blueprint for future smart cities. Now, I mentioned awareness. So what we did is basically we equipped the sustainability, one step back, we brought the entire Expo, which is 4.4 square kilometers, twice the size of Monaco, onto the Internet of Things. And we connected with Siemens and non-Siemens systems. Now, talking about awareness and transparency, in a sustainability pavilion where millions of visitors went, we created a dashboard, a sustainability dashboard, and it showed Terra. The name of the sustainability pavilion is Terra, and it's kind of a living thing. And the living thing will be put under stress, let's say, by the action of mankind. So what we did is we correlated, let's say, the number of people entering the building with the energy they consume, with the CO2 they produce, and then the heart rate of Terra went actually up. And the visitors were able to see that there's a direct impact of what we do as people onto the environment, and means also onto the energy consumption. Water consumption means electricity and water consumption, for example. So basically, we try to raise that awareness. And this is a very, very important topic. Now, on the other hand, technology can then be used also to actually realize energy efficiency or help to optimize energy systems.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Oliver. Maybe we can continue this first round of reflections with Ines. So Ines, from your perspective, can you share concrete examples to help us understand, as the public, the participants to these sessions, understand what energy system integration efficiency is about, please?
Yes, I'm happy to. ACR, the short term of Aspen Smart City Research. 5 of our buildings, we have a big test bed, and 5 of our buildings are within Seestadt, and here we work within the 4 domains. We have a smart building with the prosumer with an increasing brain. We have a smart grid, the network operator, which has to adapt to the energy transition and to the new challenges due to a lot of decentralized production. We have smart ICT as a 3rd domain. ACR is collecting 1.2 million of data points every single day. It's not easy to find ways how to make this data a treasury, to find maybe creative business models out of that. And 4th, most important, is the human. We want to integrate the smart user in the process, and maybe also find ways how to motivate him or her to change their behavior into a more sustainable one. So you see, we have 4 different domains with completely different people and different backgrounds. They have different cultures, they use different languages. And here, by applying the old school competitive approach, we won't go anywhere far. We have to learn, as Oliver said before. I really want to enhance that statement. We need new ways to find collaboration, define a win-win-win orientation, to find a solution. I think ASGR maybe is, you can imagine us maybe like a bit like a love coach. we are bringing all these different stakeholders together. We are actually unique in having our testbed and working together with an energy supplier, with a network operator, with a technology provider, and the human. And so we could already develop several patents in order to increase energy efficiency and reduce CO2 emissions.
And if I may add to what Ines just said, because I know Aspen City also quite well, and I visited it, and I know Robert Grüner as well. And you are also working on a digital twin of the city. And when you asked me earlier about like what kind of technologies we promote, and we believe that digital twins, for example, should be mandatory, especially when it comes to energy system integration and optimization of energy efficiency, because it's nothing less than just it's not that easy, but it's a virtual representation of an actual physical space. And it basically allows you to simulate before you even build. And you can simulate buildings, you can simulate entire districts, etc. And we as a company, we provide a new platform. It's called Siemens Accelerator, which allows you basically to pick and choose certain technology solution, and the digital twin technology is one part of it. So just think about it, that it enables buildings, districts, cities like Aspen, for example, to be designed more efficiently from an energy perspective, but also from an inclusivity, human-centric perspective, from the beginning of the planning through the operation, because you link basically operational processes with infrastructure data, like Ines pointed out, and data dedicated to energy, to performance management for the building and end users. So in essence, you can say using digital twin technology as one element within the chain of energy system integration and optimization is kind of the entry ticket to truly, come up with lean building design, construction, and maintenance. And it helps you also with respect to existing buildings, and you can do it right from the very beginning. I want to build upon what Ines said.
Yeah, very useful, Oliver. Thank you very much. And I will come back on these 2 points, collaboration and digital twins, later. Maybe I move on to ask Ralph, again, another perspective, European Investment Bank. So we are touching here the point of financing, and indeed financing energy efficiency is one of the big challenges to deliver this agenda. The European Investment Bank has a big role to play, and we know there are several instruments that have been designed and available for companies, for different operators. Can you please tell us more about some of these tools? Can you give us perhaps an overview of some successful examples of financing schemes that can help us to achieve system efficiency and system integration?
Well, thanks very much for having us here today. Probably before we start on elaborating on that, so for us, system integration really means also to responding to the decarbonization challenge, because what is currently happening is that, well, in the past we had a relatively disconnected heat sector and electricity sector. If we now move forward, we are going to more and more electrification of the entire system, which has a large number of interdependencies in running the entire system. Prior to that, it was relatively easy. You had a heat supply somewhere, which was gas or district heating, and on the other part, you had electricity. Now we will have the challenge that also electricity is not only coming from the supply side, but comes also from the consumer, or to use the buzzword, prosumer side. At the same time, the electricity is changing to heating with heat pumps and other systems. And on top of that one, we will have the electrification of transport. So I think it's a huge challenge for, and there I take the wording from Oliver and Ines, on collaboration, on also trying to get this together, because with all the efforts we are making, what we see, the reality out there is super different. So the part of collaboration, even inside cities, is limited. So if I look on our practical experience, and you ask us as a bank, we are a public bank, we do have contributions. So we do roughly 5 billion a year on energy efficiency, which is mostly related to energy efficiency buildings. But by far, this is not enough to get the transition done. So who are our counterparts? So we have to have a borough on the other side. So, and we have so many different decision makers for the investment, and people who then take out loans. And so it will not be a city taking out the loans for the entire population and change the system. So you would have one counterpart. So by given nature, we have relatively separated financing structures, and there's not the one holistic thingy that we do finance an entire refurbishment of a city, because you have so many different people who would need to take out loans with their banks, with private banks, with public sector. But reality is that a large number of the projects we see are still relatively basic. So that boils down to just insulating the buildings. To give you one example, there was a public program where insulation of buildings was given by a decree of that government. But in the decree, you wouldn't even be allowed to touch the thermostats, not speaking about other stuff. These were not eligible costs, and that was a grant scheme attached to that. So that makes it already complicated. In addition, then you start refurbishing large parts of a city or a large number of buildings without any interaction to the district heating company, which for a bank, well, we do have one client, but it's up then to, well, the city or the district to organize that dialogue and collaboration. But in order to do so, they would need to see the benefits. And as long as the benefits are dispersed and it's not seen what are the benefits then for the city and the political drivers behind that, we will still have relatively silo activities on that. I stop here so we can engage a little bit in a discussion on that part, but I want to drop some water into the wine that the reality on the ground is far from what we probably at a laboratory stage or at an exhibition stage experience, and what probably is for new build areas a little bit easier. But the challenge we have inside the Union is pretty much the rehabilitation of entire cities. And I think that's something where we have to reflect on how we can bring that agenda forward, both on the technical side, but also on the political or communication side, and then how we can raise or bring the finance to the right people, which also would be a reflection on what type of business models do develop out of that switch, because well, it's then the business driving that. It will not be just a top-down political agenda. There has to be a business model behind that, which requires proper regulation, which requires certainty on funding streams. But without having business models attached to that, I think this will be quite a challenge.
Yeah. Thanks. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ralph, for this important input. Vincent, would you like to comment on this consideration, reflections from Ralph? Also, and maybe in relation, based on what was said by Ines and Oliver, so they pointed out two elements that I put it down, I noted down. So they both insisted on the issue of collaboration, co-creation, and the second point was this. They pointed out this digital twins as one of the solutions to deploy, to boost system integration. Is the action plan that you are working on helping in any way to address these two points?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the collaboration is very important, of course, even more so nowadays. And and if we want to promote energy system integration in Europe, I mean, in the energy system, I think we have to have the different players collaborate more. This is one aspect that we obviously address in the action plan, and we are trying as well to have two communities collaborate more closely. On the one hand, our energy actors, on the other hand, a digital innovation community. And we see that there's a need for doing that, not only on research and innovation, but also on market uptake and the concrete solutions that we want to put forward. I mean, the issue of digital twin, I very much agree with that. I mean, it's not just in cities, but also I think what our stakeholders have told us is that it's also very important to think of digital twins of the grids. And that's something we would like also to address with the different operators in the transmission system, but also in the distribution system, because we believe that this could bring a lot of benefits in terms of monitoring the situation, but also planning investments and fostering flexibility of the energy system. And we've seen that at local level, there are very good examples. I mean, an example that comes to my mind, I don't know if Siemens was involved in that one, but that's the city of Helsinki, which is developing a digital twin. And this seems to me like a very advanced concept, which is potentially will bring a lot of benefits. And they don't just tackle the energy issues. I mean, they want to link with other aspects of their city, like water usage, for instance, and that is very very interesting. So both digital twins, both at local level, of course, in cities, but also more generally for the grid as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vincent, and thank you also for referring for your reference to this example of Helsinki and this an holistic approach that is aiming to address both energy, but also other important issues. You mentioned water. I mean, we had a very interesting sessions. Just the second session for this of this day was dedicated to that, and it's interesting that this is also taken into consideration from your perspective. Maybe Oliver, going back to you on the point of the technologies. So you already pointed out one solution. Maybe I can ask you, which technology do you think that we need to harness the full potential of digitalization and system integration in cities? You mentioned one, maybe you can give us an overview of what it is possible, what is existing already. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And see, there's a variety of technology solutions out there, and Siemens, of course, as a true technology company, we've been active for the last 175 years. We just have our anniversary, by the way, in electrification, automation, and now these days, of course, especially in digitalization. And so we can approach it, like also Ralph and Vincent pointed out, in a very holistic way, looking at the entire value chain, which you have within the energy systems, whether or not, so we can optimize the individual elements, but we can also look at it completely holistically. And it has been mentioned already, the grid, like smart grid solution, that you also use a digital twin in order to optimize that. And but let me add one comment also on the digital twin. We brought the entire expo onto a digital twin, and I pointed that out. And we monitored more than 16 use cases: energy consumption, electricity consumption, water consumption, even noise control, ecology data, waste management, irrigation systems, because lots of water gets lost through leakages, which will be detected too late. Or in other parts of the world, it's a big topic. Theft is a big topic. So we were able to basically, based on a smart city application which we developed, which can be used also for cities and districts and digital enterprises, which is very much alarm-based and notification-based. So the system monitors certain elements, it's sensor-based, and then the system automatically dispatches or sends a notification based on a predefined threshold, like for example, energy consumption by building, by floor, and says, hey, something is going on, dear operator, you need to act soon. And the system describes the activity or what's going on. And once the threshold has been already passed, then it turns into an alarm, and it allows then basically the operator to act. In the end, this saves energy, because we are talking about energy efficiency or water or whatever you're monitoring. The other topic, however, I want to build upon what Ralf also said about decarbonization of buildings. You know, and there are many other roadblocks, like when it comes to building optimization, financing, labor, digital logbooks, incentives for data sharing, and so on and so on. But he mentioned electrification. So it's very important that buildings, if you renovate them or if you construct them, that we focus on electrification, because this is basically the backbone. And that allows also then an integration with grid and e-mobility. So e-mobility, of course, helps to reduce electricity consumption, because you reduce the consumption coming from fuel, and therefore you reduce greenhouse gases. So that means we need to pay a special attention to ensure that electrical installations are also dimensioned and fit for the challenge. And then another topic Ralf mentioned, instead of focusing on individual, let's say, buildings, which is also very important, we need to have like a more holistic approach, for example, focusing on entire districts. And then it comes down to, and that relates now to the first example I gave, you can use technology like the Internet of Things, or at Siemens, we introduced Building X, which is a building suite with digital solutions, and as part of our Siemens Accelerator program, which is also a platform where you can pick and choose, and we help you finding the right technology solutions for the specific needs. One of the most important things is you can use the Internet of Things and other technologies in order to monitor real performance data. And that is very important, because if you have today, you have building design, and the building design performance does often not match the actual performance. So how do you make sure that the investments, you know, actually yield the desired result? So basically, you need to make investments conditional on the achievement of energy savings, and you can monitor that with technology. And last sentence to that, at Expo 2020, coming back to that, because I was in charge for that for 4.5 years, what we did is, due to Siemens technology, IoT, central building management systems, where we connected 210,000 data points, and our solution, where we connected more than 130 buildings and provide transparency. And that transparency was needed in order to allow Expo 2020 to get a LEED certification by the US Green Energy or Green Building Council. So 120 buildings, they're certified under the LEED standards, with 109 buildings getting a gold standard certification and 8 buildings a platinum certification. So technology is important to make things happen, but it can also be used in order to create transparency. But in order to get there, like my fellow colleagues here already said many times, we need to collaborate together. So it's not about the technology, it's about how we apply, how we use, and how we identify the technology.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Oliver. I will continue with the question, and now move on to Ines. But I would come back to you on this point, which I find extremely interesting, of the real performance that you mentioned. I think this is when you say conditioning investment to indeed technologies and interventions that can be monitored. And I would like to ask you to elaborate more on this after, so that because I think this is extremely important for really to design programs, also to guide investments and so on, in this very important particular moment with the energy crisis, climate crisis, and so on, to address. But Ines, now coming back to you, maybe again with the goal of understanding better indeed the potential and what is system integration. Can you can you tell us more about what you have done in Vienna, and on a larger scale, what the deployment of these technologies of such approach can unlock for Europe?
As Smart City, we are a big research program out of 20 different projects. They are very different. For example, we have electromobility and smart charging. We are finding new energy concepts for how to supply buildings. Buildings in general are a very important part in the digitalization of buildings. And I have to agree with the other panelists. We have here a big potential to go. I think we are at the beginning. We see that our buildings are not standard by far, and so there's a lot to do for us. In our buildings, we have optimization tools, so the assets in the buildings are optimized in the most optimal way, and also some of our buildings are digitalized in a digital twin. So the facility manager, for example, is able to move around the building from his desk and to check facilities. As I said before, AACR is a bit like a love coach. Maybe one of you already have a couple therapy, but I don't want to know. You can keep the secret. But you know probably that every human has to improve and work on communication and trust. And this has to be done also within buildings. Our buildings, we already taught them 11 different languages. So the building is able to know all the different assets in the building, know the actual status, what's going on, how much energy is supplied, how much is the demand. And also the building has to be able to communicate with the grid and also with the neighbor buildings. So by connecting the digital and the physical parts, we work on our vision and autonomous building to increase energy efficiency and reduce CO2 emissions. Maybe everybody knows an autopilot. What is an autopilot? And in future, also we have to have the building and the grid finding arrangement with each other, and this is a lot of couple therapy necessary, I think. And they have to arrange to find best decision for the overall society.
Thank you very much. It's very interesting. Ralph, I'm coming back to you. Maybe we can go back to an overview of what is available. You mentioned 5 billion euros of investments from the EIB on energy efficiency. We know most of that, or some of that, goes to buildings. Maybe you can give us more information about what is available, but also I don't know if you want to elaborate more on what you said in the first round based on the comments, on the reflections of this from the speakers.
Thanks. Well, first on what is available. So we are not a grant program, so we are demand driven. So we need people who ask for our loans. For sure, we go out and we tell about the eligibilities. So what is available is prepared for doing large amounts of energy finance in all different forms that can come in equity via the EIF, that come into investments, into innovation, or in funds. I get an error message here. You can still hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
I just had a black screen here, sorry. Which can come also in a lot of intermediate finance, and that's probably the next challenge that we also have to translate. what we are doing through commercial banks to whom we give basic credit lines, which they on-lend, because given the nature of energy efficiency, this is a lot of small investments which we hand out through intermediate operations. We do co-finance alongside the grant programs, notably the Commission, let it be the RF or ERDF finance or national member state finance. So we also give the part of the co-financing to that. With all that having in mind, we should be aware that having all these public finance available will not be sufficient. So in what we're doing, we always try to support business models which also leverage private finance. That comes to my point before. There has to be, in all the projects we are financing, an economic rationale. So next to the financial profitability, which can be ensured also partly for new uptake by grants, it has to have an economic rationale. So that's very important, because only if it has a real economic rationale, then you will also have the possibility to develop business models. And once you have business models, then you get also private finance into it. So we can only be a part of the game. And whatever we do, we have to bring this to business models which are replicable and where there's an industry to take this up. And the colleague from Siemens will know that well, it's still a hard sell in EU cities and public sector to sell energy performance contracting as being a business model which well, can be high tech, can be low tech, but just the approach of the public sector to getting private companies in their buildings, guaranteeing performance, making relatively complicated public procurement is already a challenge. And I would bet that this is the same if we want to have cities trying to work on refurbishment of entire districts. So also to get people together. But getting, you asked on the offer, and so we have Vincent here from DG Energy. And what we're doing since 2009, we run a facility which basically is helping public but also private entities in developing their investment programs with regard to energy efficiency. So we've supported up to now something like 8 billion euro of investment. And we are open to any city who would come to us and would say, well, we do know partly what we have to do, but we do need to have additional staff in our city. We do need to hire additional consultants who help us. So this Eleanor facility still has sufficient money also now under InvestEU. We do have an investment focus. So at the end of the day, something has to happen. So this will not only finance studies. So if you do not realize the investment, you need to repay the money. But you do not need to finance with the bank. You can finance with whatever means you deem appropriate, but the technical assistance funding is available, and that can be relatively large amounts of funding. We probably, in the context of the city's mission of the selected 100 cities, we will probably get some pilot projects which can then be replicated, because replication out of what we do under the facility is also important. We do have other facilities who also help managing authorities and member states in designing programs under ERDF. That's our JASPERS program, where we help them also to look in how can a design of a grant program look like, where you could go the extra mile. And we're going even more upstream with a facility for core regions in transition. And that was one of the examples where we're now working with one city who's basically decarbonizing the entire city by changing the district heating to renewables and starting the refurbishment process of the entire city. And then highlighting how the strategy of that city has to be in order to avail of the other funding facilities, so that they know where they can get the additional funding they may probably need, but also having a view on what is a sustainable structure for a district heating company, where basically at the same time you say, well, we take away your demand for your district heating. So you need to find a business model on how you can become sustainable in the long run, even if on the demand side you're really going downwards the demand. On the reflection of what's said in the panel, and I appreciate the high tech. However, reality is that this well, we still have millions of relatively basic residential homes to refurbish. And sometimes it's difficult to touch the entire apartment. So it will be a lot of just work on the building fabric. And we have to find ways how we can get at least data that help us in bringing this one step forward. I think that's a challenge on how you can integrate this. If we do finance under energy efficiency new buildings, which have to be better than the standard, so ends up minus, having the taxonomy in mind, we do require them to integrate a building energy management system if we want to have the finance with us. So at least to provide the data, and this is what we're doing with some of the regional utilities as well, if they have smart meter rollout programs. This is something we do finance, and where we see that this is probably one of the first steps just to connect all the points which we need to get all the information prior to setting up systems, which then can make digital modeling of that. I stop here.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Ralph. Maybe very quick question. You mentioned Elena. Is that the funds dedicated to Elena fully spent? Because the issue of technical assistance and capacity building and so on is key to develop and to develop these programs for buildings, renovation buildings, for example, programs ambitious at district level and so on. We always thought that the allocations for that facility was not sufficient given the challenge. But I'm wondering if then, based on what you say, the fact that you need someone asking for this funds, are you able to spend all the funds dedicated to Elena?
Well, we are able to spend, but there's still budget available also for the entire current MFF. So we think even with the policy review in 24, that this funding will be available until 27. So what we're currently doing, we finance about 40 million just for the technical assistance grant per year. So if you translate this in brains and working hours, so that's quite significant. On funding being available, then always for a time frame from 3 to 4 years for all the sectors which we have for energy efficiency, building integrated renewables, but also for transport where the allocation is a bit lower. So I think that's one part. What we're also discussing with member states to replicate that model in member states, because they do have TA funding available under the EEDayEU programs, that as we are running this already now for a decade, we can help them to set up systems or facilities in the member state, which can reply probably also to smaller municipalities, but having the same way of how this works, because what we achieved with Elena is an alignment of interest. It is a grant, but it's a conditional grant. So it is subject of the realization of the investment, and it will need to be repaid if the investment is not reached. So that aligns interest and gives some discipline in delivering on the investment and the work program which is there. But for everybody listening, there is still funding available. We'd be happy also to take up more on well, what we have just discussed in that area. We do have also a lot of finance now for one-stop shops, which was mentioned in earlier sessions and in the starting session, just to help also to get information out to individuals in line with potentially a city strategy.
Thank you. Very useful. Thanks, Ralph. Vincent, maybe from your perspective, from the European Commission perspective, what kind of support exists to empower city district through digitalization and system integration? I guess there are opportunities from your side as well.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, Ralph mentioned some of them, but perhaps first of all, I should mention the legislation that exists and that helps foster digitalization in cities and everywhere else. I mean, we've discussed, and it was clearly said by several of the speakers this morning. I mean, we need to have access to data, And that's what we've started to promote with our legislation. I mean, you know that last year we came up with a new package where we revised our complete energy legislation, and we've introduced in there elements, provisions that will foster data access. I think this is essential, and that by the way answers one of the questions which I see in the Q&A part. What are the barriers to increase digitization? One of them is the lack of interoperability of data, and we're not accessing all the data we need, and we're not using all the data we have access to. So, for example, in the Renewable Directive, we have provisions that define access to data requirements for the smart and bidirectional charging of electric vehicles. I mean, that's an important thing. We have new provision in the revised Buildings Directive that define access to buildings data that enable smart building services and renovation. We have, of course, in the Electricity Market Directive and regulation, we also have provisions, for instance, regarding data from smart meters, which are also important. So, as you can see, the legal basis to foster data exchange in the energy sector will soon be reinforced with this new revised directive. And on top of that, there are a number of initiatives supported by EU funding to create good enabling conditions to help cities. Ralph mentioned Elena. I fully agree. It's a fantastic tool. We also have the Covenant of Mayors, which brings together more than 10,000 cities. I mean, it's a good tool to help cities exchange and network. Under Horizon Europe, we have the mission for climate neutral and smart cities that is aiming at least 100 climate neutral cities in the EU by 2030. We also have the Smart Cities Marketplace to match, on the one hand, investors and on the other hand, local actors, local projects. We've just launched a new partnership, which is called Driving Urban Transition, with many member states involved, and that will offer funding to invest in urban research and innovation. You were asking, Luigi, about Elena and how we can make best use of Elena. We have in the LIFE program, the European City Facility, which helps all kinds of cities, including the small cities, with a small grant in order for them to move from their sustainable energy and climate action plan to a more mature project that can then go to technical assistance. So that's bridging the gap between the plans and the Elena facility, and that aims also at making that facility used by more cities. I don't have time to cover all the programs, but let me mention as well the Digital Europe program. Since we're talking about digitization, we also have a Digital Europe program that offers funding, and of course the cohesion policy funds. I mean, this is where the big money is, and this is also to undertake energy efficiency measures and help with the renovation of buildings, in particular in those regions of Europe which need it the most. So I think that's in a nutshell what we have. There's a big list of programs, but also regulations that are available, and I think if cities, if there are representatives from cities here at present and listening to us, and they are interested in this kind of funding, the best would be to go to the Covenant of Mayors website, where they have listed all these sources of funding. Sometimes it's difficult to navigate through the maze of all these opportunities, but I think they've done a good job in the mapping all of them. Thank you.
Indeed, thank you, Vincent. There are, from what I hear, there is many opportunities out there. Sometimes it's difficult indeed to navigate, to understand all these different tools. Oliver, I would like to come back to you to that question on real performance, because I think that was extremely interesting. And maybe I don't know if you can link that also to the one point that was raised by Ralph about the existing building stock, some of the concerns. So apparently, indeed, it is probably easier do and to deploy some of this approach and system integration in the new built rather than the residential, rather than the existing building. So maybe you can give us make some reflections on these 2 points.
Yeah, let me start with the second one, brownfield versus greenfield. Brownfield means like you have an existing building stock, and greenfield, you create something from scratch. At the first glance, and I'm not talking from a investing, banking, financing perspective, but from a technology perspective, at the first glance, you would say, you know what, if you have a greenfield approach, it's easier because eventually, in order to get these real performance data, you got to equip your assets, any asset in a city, whether it's a building or it's a curb or it's a street light, a traffic light, whatever it is, you got to equip it with sensors which allow you to collect data and harvest data. Now today, a sensor is not very expensive. So you can retrospectively, you can retrofit any asset with sensors. And that would then which then allows you to achieve similar results like actual performance monitoring or whatever you want to monitor, air quality, waste management, etc., in a greenfield or in a brownfield approach. So that is very, very similar, actually. Of course, it's nicer if you have the walls already open and you place your sensors in there and your routers and your gateways, which you establish done. Then on the other hand, one of the bigger issues which you have in both approaches, greenfield and brownfield, is system integration. Because you already have systems running, how do you integrate the different systems? And there we come to the energy system integration, like the name implies. And so that is an additional effort, but also that you have, whether or not you have a greenfield or a brownfield approach. One of the real issues, if you take a step back, and is really, and especially in the Western hemisphere, that whether or not you have a smart city strategy which includes energy efficiency topics or not. And I remember I came across an analysis by a big consulting firm, non-Siemens, and they said out of 4,000 cities they analyzed, 153 had a smart city strategy, and there are a few key elements in there. And one is, of course, budget and funding, but the other one is governance and decision-making structure. And there we need to go beyond the typical election cycle of a mayor. It needs to be long-term, and then, of course, it's about collaboration and coming up with roadmaps and technologies, which then assign budget to technology implementation. You start small with a pilot, and then you scale up. And that can result in or can be the basis for a concept, a roadmap, which then can be financed by a bank because it can be very convincing. In the end, it's all about that we need to create a business case. So I think it's a little bit of a bigger topic and not so much related whether or not it's brownfield or it's greenfield, if you allow me, from the technology perspective. Now, how do we do that actually from a technology-wise? I kind of mentioned it already. So in essence, if you want to achieve zero-emission buildings, you need to equip it with measuring and control devices, like I mentioned, sensors. And then it's about monitoring and regulating not only water consumption, which is very important, and energy consumption, but even topics like indoor air quality. And because in the end, you want to increase not only the outdoor air quality, but also indoor environmental quality, like including topics like air temperature and humidity. Because once you do that, you increase the, let's say, attractiveness of your built environment, and you attract not only residents, people, but you attract also companies. And that is very, very important. That's what we also did at Expo 2020, where it's all about small and medium enterprises. And then you add to your business case, because in the end, you want to make money. If you invest, you want to realize a rate of return. Now, the other topic, which has been discussed by the panelists and also brought up by you and by Ralf, was the topic of data. We believe that there needs to be a data management framework, and I know that the regulation already goes that way. So data harvesting and also data discovery, security, privacy, and all the whole 9 yards topic of course, that affect the level of, let's say, changes in the data marketplace. And if you want to access data, normally it's associated with additional cost for the one who wants to access data. So we need to think about, from a regulatory perspective on an EU level, whether or not it makes sense. And that's what also Siemens already recommended, whether or not we can have incentives for private data owners to share their data, those who own buildings big times. And then there's another very important element, and that is about standardization of certificates. It's about data logs, it's about passports basically, and reports, because only if you have that, then you can measure against something. And then you come back to, I come back to the topic of, yeah, you design something, but then it might deviate from the actual performance, and the actual performance you can measure through these sensors. And then last but not least, it comes down to regularly inspect on whether or not it's true. So you can think about a certain certificate for some years, like 3, 4, 5 years, we would say, as a company would say 5 years. But it's very important that then on an EU level, that it's mandatory to inspect heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems, and especially monitor and control on whether or not they have been optimally adjusted, and in order to not only optimize energy consumption, but to avoid energy waste, which are key elements of energy system integration, to my understanding. Now, I want to give you a last sentence to that, 2 examples. As a company, we optimize Marriott hotels in Europe. When it comes to, because Ralf also mentioned energy performance contracting, etc., we do energy efficiency audits, and then yes, we agree certain savings, and we are also willing to accept, that they pay us based on the savings realized. With hotels, with Marriott hotels in Europe, we optimize 20 facilities, and we reduce CO2 by 18,000 tons on an annual basis. And we saved energy costs in the amount of 5.5 million euros on an annual basis. And if I remember correctly, there was like return on invest, I think 2-3 years, something like that. And Radio Bremen, Deutsch Radio Bremen, that was an initiative where we optimized well cooling and heat pump usage and concrete core activation. Concrete core activation is nothing else that you basically how do you say, inject air, warm air or cool air through the holes within the concrete slabs to heat the building fabric basically directly before supplying the air to the occupied spaces. So overall, to sum this up, as a company, we estimated once that we probably saved energy costs by 2 billion euros over time. For our customers. We optimized more than 7,000 buildings. We serviced more than 35,000 buildings, and we helped to reduce the CO2 emission by roughly 10.5 million tons on an annual basis, like each year. So it is possible, but Ralf, you're absolutely right. Still, it requires lots of education and awareness in order to convince governments and cities and mayors to invest, because sometimes the benefit is not obvious. It does require some breath, but in the end, like a university focuses on employability, a city should focus on attracting talent and companies, and they only come if they can live in safe and healthy and places with a high quality of life, which also allows them to participate in decision making, because we all have that sense of community. Sorry for deviating a bit. These are topics, I think, of utmost importance.
No, that's very useful. I think you're right. We need a mix of raising awareness, education, information, and of course the regulatory push from and I think we have several important directives now under revisions that could be supporting and promoting this agenda, namely obviously the energy performance of building directive. But I think I would like to take now some questions from the chat. So going in the order, I see the first one, which refers to public buildings. Maybe, I think, Ines, this could be something that you could, I mean, you have partially addressed before, giving some examples, I guess, of some solutions of technologies. How can buildings become flexible assets to better respond to energy price signals? Maybe you want to have a bit of a couple of reflections on this, and I don't know if there are other colleagues that are interested also in addressing this question. And then I have another one for you, Vincent. The second question is about sector integration is showing a lot of potential in Denmark, but it's fairly unexplored. How could the EU boost the integration of sectors like residential, industries, or district heating? It's a very broad broad question. Maybe you can add a couple of consideration there, and then I will go, and let's start with these two, and then I will continue. Ines.
Yeah, it's a very good question. It's not that easy. It's about how can we increase or connect flexible buildings to the grid, and then how can we use them in a social way, right? At ASR, we already have one building which is equipped with a building energy optimization system from Siemens, and it knows the forecast of its energy production. The building has a PV panel, which the surface is bigger than its roof because it's built like this. The building has storage, it has sector coupling, it has heat pumps, and there's a lot of flexibility in this building. The assets can forecast the supply and the demand, and they optimize the schedule, and of course they also operate the schedule. This building already is certificate at APG, Austrian Power Grid. So its flexibilities can be traded on the balancing market in Austria, and can make even profit out by selling their flexibilities. We could enable this only because we are a research company working together with Wien Energie, the supplier, and the Wien Energie, Vienna Energy actually is pooling a lot of small flexibilities, because it does not make any sense that every single building is actually trading its flexibilities. It's important that there is one big energy supplier who is pooling all the little flexibilities and then deciding for the overall society. Also, we work together, of course, with the Wiener Netze, with the operation grid. So this was possible, but I think digitalization and technology is key. And as Oliver said before, there is high sophisticated, powerful technology from Siemens, like the Building X suite. We work with everything a lot, and we enjoy. But there are a lot of not so powerful buildings, a lot of very normal buildings within the city. Not big like hotels and hospitals and universities, but also like residential homes. And here I see that we need also data, and I don't see a lot of data, unfortunately.
And you're absolutely right, Ines. That's true. If I may comment on that, and I think that's another topic, and there are a few questions about data privacy. Maybe I can come to that later. But you have definitely a point: commercial versus residential. But in the end, it comes always down to what is the incentive for me, personal incentive, to share my data, whether or not I'm a private person or I'm a company. That's it. Yeah. So I want to stop right now, but maybe later I can add to that.
Maybe Oliver, because indeed we have from Natalie Zeranska here. I see a few questions about data. Indeed, what about data privacy policies? How would those need to change to favor more access to data? And then sort of a comment more than a question. Data privacy and digitalized worlds based on the use of data are not fully compatible. It seems that they're not fully compatible. Maybe you can comment on this on these points.
Absolutely. And yes, that is a topic which concerns all of us, and has been in discussion like forever since we started like the fourth industrial revolution, where digitization is a core element. And there's not an easy answer to that. However, as I just tried to explain, it comes down to your personal benefit. And I remember that use case I read about, we have these, on the one hand side, we're all willing to give our private data, to everyone, whether it's Instagram or other Facebook or social media. Smartphone has about 11 sensors minimum, and it sends every day, every minute, every hour. You can make calls even if you switch it off, and they can locate you. Are we having an issue with that? No, definitely not. But when it comes to providing data about systems or like air quality data, electricity consumption, or water consumption, then I believe maybe we can be less concerned, especially if it will be anonymized. Okay. On the other hand, it also gives us the opportunity to create that transparency. Like here in Dubai, for example, the utility provider is called Diva. I can see myself, okay, how much water I have used, how much electricity I have used. Of course, it's a no-brainer, but I can see also the comparison to the district I'm living in. So, and coming back again, data privacy or data sharing, if you move it, you anonymize and you move it to a district level, maybe that's then something people would rather buy in. But back to data privacy. And we are not talking about data security. This is like a given. Any product needs to be secure, and cybersecurity standards need to be adhered. And Siemens also is one of the founding members of the Charter of Trust. So cybersecurity and data protection are very important. So what I wanted to say also is, just imagine you have these devices. You can have fitness devices that measure your heartbeat and your blood pressure. And just imagine that this device would send a signal during the night when it discovers an anomaly in your heartbeat. Means basically nothing else that, maybe in 1 hour, you will unfortunately have a heart attack. And that sends a message to a hospital. Maybe you're a patient at risk already. And that automatically triggers a dispatch of a rescue service. And they come to you while you're asleep, and they pick you up. And trust me, the next morning you wake up, you will be very happy that you had that device and that you were willing to share some personal data. So that means it's, in the end, it comes down to, yes, it's a very, very important topic and very crucial, and it concerns all of us, but it comes down to personal choice. If we are willing to share data or not, because in the end, even a company consists of individuals. So that is my answer to that. It's not black and white, unfortunately.
Thank you, Oliver. I think we have only 2 minutes left to the end of this very rich sessions. A lot of content, a lot of ideas. May I suggest we do the last tour de table with like a 30 seconds intervention from all the speakers on maybe there is something that you really wanted to say that you missed to the opportunity to say before, or maybe a final consideration on what has been discussed. And I would like to start with Vincent. Vincent, like really 30-45 seconds just to close this again.
Yeah, thank you. Unfortunately, I won't have time to answer the question that was asked in the chat, but I'm happy to answer later on. But I know just on my side, I think we've been discussing how important digitalization is in cities, but also in the overall energy system. I mean, we are moving to a world where more and more the energy production would be decentralized and the decarbonized. Electricity, the share of electricity in our energy mix will increase a lot, and all that means that we need more flexibility, and flexibility means more digitization. Digitization means access to data, which we need to foster, as it was said during that meeting and during that conference. And this is why we're coming at European level with an action plan on the digitization of the energy sector to give that subject more importance with concrete measures, and that should be hopefully adopted in the coming days. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Vincent, to be with us and share the information on this plan. We will follow the developments. Ines, would you like to have the final comments, inputs to the discussion?
I want to use my final 30 seconds to send best regards from my CEO, Robert Kunners. He is very sorry he couldn't participate in the session, but he had to meet another stakeholder. He couldn't postpone. Since I personally think that diversity is very important, I'm also happy I could participate.
Indeed. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ines, for your contribution.
Are you asking me? I didn't hear.
Yeah, yes, just a final 30 seconds. Yeah, 30 seconds.
First of all, Ines, please say hello to Robert for me. And I'm also, of course, very happy to have you in the call, if I may say that. I mean, overall, the topic, if you think about, I mean, we see some significant changes, and the most significant changes in the history, basically. And transition towards an energy system which allows greater efficiency and control, of course, will have a significant impact on the way we live and of course, the future of mankind. And now these are big words, but it's very true. That's what we are talking about here. And I appreciate that we have the chance of such a platform, which in essence can spark collaboration based on dialogue. Last but not least, I truly believe that digital technology can help cope with energy system, energy efficiency related challenges, and awareness and collaboration are equally important, because only then we can, in essence, strengthen and either create or strengthen a commitment to jointly battle the challenges related to what we discussed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oliver and Ralph.
Well, as I mentioned before, I think this is not a technology question. That can only be an instrument. So it's about communication. It's about also making people feel what are the benefits. And I think there's still some explanation necessary. And also to make then the impact really something tangible. You mentioned the mobile phone, so everybody knows what they get out of it. If they share their data on whatever traffic management system, they have immediate benefit. And I think that's one part which we shouldn't forget, this human dimension, if we really want to have an uptake, and just avoid, I'm an engineer, but we should avoid looking on that just from an engineering perspective.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Ralph. I just need, we are 2 minutes over. I just need 10-15 seconds to also, first of all, thank you, all of you, for taking part to this panel, but also to close this first session of the European Energy, first part of the European Energy Efficiency Day. We will start again at 2 with session 4, which is about making industry fit for 55, in a session where we will highlight the potential of energy and resource efficiency as a driver of decarbonization and competitiveness of European industry. So the next sessions at 2, from 2 to 3:15. Again, thank you very much for being with us, and see you later. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.